what strikes me about the courtroom for the Proud Boys is that it's the mirror image of where the Oath Keepers were tried. So we have the defendants on one side, the jury on the other, and this sea of lawyers in between with obviously opposing points of view. It really is almost like a TV show, except it's happening in real life.
Yeah, so I want to bring this up because I'm not going to ask you if you were there, but obviously I was there. I'm very familiar with the trials. I've been around this, but I want to get into a specific case that you're tracking, which is about 5 Proud Boys that were accused of planning January 6th. Now, 2 years after the now infamous day, the government has to prove its claim that the Capitol breach was premeditated. How do you feel that case is going in regards to this specific example?
Right. So Enrique Tarrio, Zach Reel, Joe Biggs, Dominic Pizzola, and Ethan Ordine are all charged with seditious conspiracy. There are 3 counts involved there. There's also a couple other charges. Dominic Pizzola is charged with robbery for allegedly taking a police riot shield. We're only 3 days in. I think that's the most surprising thing. So I was in the courtroom on January 12th when both sides delivered their opening statements, and we got to hear sort of a preview of what the jury's going to hear. And the most striking thing to me is that it's just it feels like a mess, right? Every time we hear one thing from one side, there's a counterpoint. There really is this feel that the truth is not being presented, obviously, and that a lot of information is being kept, that we'll just hear in drips and drabs as this I think it's going to be a 6 to 8 week trial plays out.
Okay, so I know these people. I've met them multiple times while I've been out in the field. I've rubbed shoulders with them. I'm not going to say whether I confirm or deny that I saw them, inside of the building. I'm just going to go ahead and, we're not in court, but I'll plead on the 5th on that, or just journalistic immunity. But I will say I did see them outside of the building, and this is what they're being prosecuted for. So we have to prove a case that Proud Boys planned this. Not to be rude to the Proud Boys, but I don't know if you've ever been to one of their own events. They're not even that good at planning their own
Yeah,
events.
my favorite line was Carmen Hernandez, Zach Reel's attorney, said, these guys couldn't even place a group order at McDonald's. You think they planned an insurrection? It was great. It does sort of summarize the energy there.
I will say in Portland, that's what I'm saying. They brought like a band together. They just drink beer. I've never seen any direct coordination. The worst thing that's happened is a brawl. Do we see any evidence being presented thus far as we get into this that is proving that these people plan this in a traditional sense? Or do you feel like the evidence that's being presented is just skewing towards a pre-confirmed bias?
I feel like if the government had a clear indication of a plan, remember, none of these guys live together. It's not like they have in-person meetings. They would have presented it from the beginning, right? So Carmen Hernandez, who's representing Zach Reel, pointed out that this is the largest investigation in U.S. history. They've collected over 160,000 pieces of communication from Telegram, from text messages, whatever. And there is no smoking gun. There's no one saying, okay, boys, so here's where we're going to go, and here's what we're going to do, and you go over there, and you do this, and here's the goal. There's none of that. In fact, there are text messages presented, again, during the defense's opening statements that show that, at midnight or whatever the night before, these guys are like, so where are we meeting? What time? And it's not to downplay, their intention for being there. They had a permit to protest. There were obviously some steps taken to organize. But on the other hand, I would think that seditious conspiracy takes a little bit more than that. Now, there are judges who will say that anyone who shares the same ideology, who shows up at the same place, could be convicted of seditious conspiracy. I just don't know that that is enough to convince the jury in this case. We don't really know.
Right. So let's talk about this other aspect this was floating around a lot around the time that January 6th happened. But what was Antifa's role in the case being built against the Proud Boys and other people that were there on January 6th?
So the federal prosecutor specifically called out during opening statements that Antifa is not on trial. He said they're not a part of this. He acknowledged that at times the Proud Boys and Antifa have had conflicts in other cities and other places, but they made no specific mention of Antifa being at all an influence on this. They specifically said Antifa's not on trial. I think that there were a couple moments where we saw the defense teams, each defendant is being represented by a different attorney, and they all presented opening statements. It basically lasted like 5 hours. And each one took a different tactic towards pointing the finger at Antifa or Trump. But more than anything, they're saying the federal government is saying that this was a coordinated effort specifically among these 5 defendants, whereas their defense is saying, yes, these 5 guys plan to go to DC, but they did not plan to start what happened there that day. They present it as just a bunch of, Nick Smith, who's representing one of the defendants, said that it was a bunch of small decisions that led to something no one could have expected. And I think that's basically it. I think, as a journalist, I try to stay pretty neutral on this and just absorb the facts as much as possible. And I hope that's reflected in my writing. But there is no smoking gun. So how can we say that this was a planned attack? We know that these guys share similar values. They joined in organizations that's based on values. But is that enough to say that it's a seditious conspiracy? I just don't think so.
Right. And you said here from your article, which you guys should click the link in the description, but Joe Bigg's legal team delayed giving an opening statement that day because his lawyer, Norman Pattis, I don't know how to pronounce it, was representing Alex Jones, had been suspended from the CT bar. As the court was about to adjourn for the day, Pattis told the judge that he had received a stay of his suspension. Personally, the most impactful part of watching an opening statement was sitting with the crowd. I can talk about that. The family of convicted people said that day. They are a unique group of people. And so these are pretty interesting circumstances. In the middle of the trial, somebody's lawyer is getting suspended. What happened there?
Yeah. So Norm Pattis, I've always said Pattis. That was what everyone around me told me his name was. He actually represented Alex Jones when he was facing some of the lawsuit in connection to the Sandy Hook. And Pattis had some issues with presenting medical records or some confidential information. I'm not super familiar with it, but he is now representing Biggs, and he was given a 6-month suspension from the Connecticut bar. Well, without being admitted to the Connecticut bar, he can't represent Biggs in DC. And so we go through this almost 12-hour day. It's like 10 hours, whatever. And right at the end, we spent all morning trying to figure out if he could be he could represent Biggs. And at the end, he stands up and says, Judge Kelly, I've been given a stay of my suspension, so can I rejoin the table? He was allowed to sit behind the bar. That means like where all the legal tables are. By this way, this man has like a huge gray ponytail. He's a character indeed. But he will be allowed to represent his client. I mean, there have been objections all along the way. This really seems like quite a fight. When the government presented their opening statement, it was 90 minutes. There was video presentation, not doctored, but, graphics added to highlight different defendants as they move through crowds, things like that. And they were just given 90 minutes to talk. And then we get to the 5 defense attorneys presenting their opening statements, and I think the government interjected like at least 3 times. And at one point, this really irritated one of the defense attorneys. They're saying, we let them speak. Why are they objecting to our inquiries and everything else right now? So Norm Pattis being admitted or giving an exemption, not being allowed to represent a client, this back and forth is just a reflection of all the pressure that's being put on the defense team right now. Right.
And I think one of the interesting things, though, is that you said that the lawyers representing the defendants repeatedly drew attention to facts omitted by the government. Not every defendant entered the building. In fact, videos show some discouraging the crowd from entering, and none of them planned what they would do when they gathered in Washington, D.C. In fact, you said text messages show that they were still trying to figure out what time and where to meet up late into the night of January 5th. None of the men went to Washington, D.C. armed with any weapon. So do you feel like this evidence, like the government is trying to frame them? Would you use that term? Or like how else would you explain the fact that the government is either intentionally omitting evidence or trying to paint a picture to make these people seem more organized, more malicious, more violent, and more apt to be considered insurrectionists than the evidence actually presents? I want to remind you guys that there's so many restrictions on smoking today, and many of you guys are either looking for an alternative to smoking because there is some reason that you don't want to, or someone in your family wants you to stop, or you're looking for a more convenient way to smoke without all the smoke clouds, the plumes, the vapors. and you still want to get your nicotine high or your buzz. Now, if you're 21 or older, listen to me. Pixotine has nicotine-infused toothpicks that are an amazing alternative to smoking habits. Now, what these are is they come in amazing flavors. You have original flavor, which tastes good, but I do love the winter fresh, and I also love the mint. You can use these in a plane and train in an automobile. Dr. Seuss says you can have them with green eggs and ham. It doesn't really matter, but they taste delicious. They give you the nicotine delivery, and many of you guys know it's so hard to quit smoking, and this is a way to help to just have an alternative. And they say that I can't say certain things because, you know, they don't want to discourage people from smoking. Not the company, but the government doesn't want to. They don't want me to do anything to tell you that this is an alternative. But I'll tell you, I don't personally like the additives in cigarettes and all of these other things. And so if you're somebody who's looking for that alternative, it's great. And they win countless awards from different groups and advocacy groups. But on top of that, they're also just delicious. It's a great way to relax, and it's something that you can do if you already smoke and you're looking for a different alternative. Check this out. I like it better than chewing tobacco or any type of other tobacco products. I do love a good cigar now and then. They are amazing, but this is also amazing. Nicotine-infused toothpicks from Pixotine. Go to pixotine.com/Elijah. That's pixotine.com/Elijah. Click the link in the description. Get 20% off the entire store site-wide. Thank you for supporting yourself, your health, your habits, and also supporting the show and the people that support us.